Hello and welcome to the Successful Mentalist podcast. My name is Ashley Green. As always, I'm joined by the fantastic co-host that is Aidan O'Sullivan. But as you guys have probably seen, and I don't know why I was going to say Aidan, who is a special guest today, because everyone knows from the title, guys, we do have an incredible guest on the podcast. This is someone absolutely fantastic, and he is going to blow your mind with the advice shared. But heck, just go for it. Aidan, plug away. Who have we got? Tell us some info about him.
We have none other than the legendary Drummond Money-Coutts. Now, we've been fans of Drummond for a long time, and if ever you've seen any of his work on YouTube or with the DMC Elites or the Alphas, the playing cards designed by Phil Smith, Drummond is just incredible. He's got a Netflix series out there, 8-part Netflix series called Death by Magic, in which each episode explores acts that have unfortunately died through their stunts, and it recreates them in incredible. It genuinely is one of my favorite magic shows out there. But this episode was really, really important because we didn't talk about any of that. In fact, we actually spoke a lot more about presence and close-up magic and the sense of being in the moment. It was a really, really interesting discussion. I've personally come away with an awful lot from this on both a personal and professional level. So again, I'm hugely grateful for this opportunity.
Oh, and it's not just you, Aidan, that got so much from it. Me as well. Like, I learned so much, and I know you guys listening right now are going to absolutely love it. I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to Drummond for being so open, so honest, and up for sharing so much incredible gold and the information that actually goes on within his head. This podcast is going to start a little bit differently from the others, more as a casual chat, and then it's going to get into the meat of the content. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
We made a charity DVD. We raised this money for a school in Kenya. And I remember going there we filled our cases with so many different tricks and ideas. And then we got there and we realized that without the language that we were so used to in England, it suddenly becomes so limited, and it becomes far more the visual essence of what you're doing becomes so much more important, and instructions and explaining things to people and talking for too long, you lose people. And so it was a huge realization back then, and realizing that language really is, in many parts of the world, well, it depends where you're performing, but for me then, Kenya, we were East Africa, language was optional. It basically, you had to make yourself completely understood in terms of what you were doing without that. And that was a really interesting moment, because of course in England or in America, wherever people perform, it's all about language and the presentation and what you're saying and the lines that you write, and suddenly all of those fall away, and it's about gestures and body language and having yourself understood physically. So that was something. And then since then, of course, traveling, more professionally, it's always fascinating to me how different cultures will interpret magic in so many different ways. And in the Far East, in general terms, in the Far East, magic has more spiritual connotations. In parts of Africa, it's far darker with witchcraft and voodoo. And European countries, Russian countries, I've done a few Russian, evenings, Russian clients, and it's always so interesting to me. Card magic, in my experience, card magic is just of so little interest. And most often I have people come up to me and asking me to read their palms. So that's always something I have to brush up on, because for whatever reason, you bring out a deck of cards, and I've just had this a few times now at Russian evenings where the interest isn't there. And I think specific to that, playing cards is a really interesting point that, again, nobody is more interested or loves playing cards more than magicians. But the truth is, out there in the real world, very few people have handled a deck recently, perhaps years and years, a decade or so since they last sat down, shuffled a deck. They were familiar with the suits, with the number of cards in a deck. And that's something that I see more and more, and I appreciate more and more, the fact that playing cards a lot of people are not familiar, a lot of people are just not very interested. And I think it would be as arbitrary to a lot of people as perhaps, if somebody was to do a piece of magic for you with a tarot deck, or a German suit of playing cards with their different symbols and and values, and it would connect with you. It would connect with them in a similar sort of way. And that's part of creating the Alphas deck, which I'm such a champion of, simply because it allows a connection that is universal, that goes so far beyond a 4 of clubs or a poker deal or something that just, to most people, it may perhaps be technically impressive or skillful, but it's certainly not touching or emotional or profoundly magical, So that's something I was at about 2 years ago, I went to Budapest, and I went to the Harry Houdini Museum in Budapest, and we were queuing up to go in, and they ask everybody to begin the tour of the museum. They say, in order to go through this safe and into the museum, how many cards are in a deck of cards? Because at the end of the tour, they then say Houdini died at the same, his age was the same number. They sort of bring it all together. And I didn't want to say anything. I was quite intrigued to see what people would say. And there were 25 people there, Americans, Japanese, Europeans, Hungarians, English people. Nobody said 52. And there was a very loud woman at the front screaming that it was 50. She knew it was 50 cards in a deck. Nobody said 52. And that blew my mind, that out of 20, 25 people, nobody had the answer. And it showed to me how unfamiliar so many people are. So I think that's really important for people to remember when they pull out a deck and go deep into a poker deal or a clever 4 of clubs. It's just, most people no longer have that connection. 40 years ago, it was very different, but today, the number of people who would play cards consistently or regularly is a fraction of what it was. And I think with that comes a slight distance in terms of interest.
Yeah, 100%. So really, I think this is going to be one interesting podcast episode for all of the listeners, to be honest, because as we were saying just before we started recording today, like, you've done so many incredible things. And from what we've already heard, like, the places you've gone, the places you've explored, and talking about all these various different cultures and the way you've had to adapt in situations. Do you think it's important to always be prepared to adapt and change when you're in new environments then?
I think it's everything. I mean, they say there's that quote in life, it's not the strongest that survive, it's those that are most adaptable to change. And I think magically it's exactly the same. Look, if you're going to perform in the same, let's say, local bar or the same village hall or the same Las Vegas theater or whatever it is for 30 years, adaptability is less of a problem. But if you're going to go into a small private evening and then a dinner for 500 people and then a show in France and then for an evening of Russian clients and whatever it's going to be, adaptability is everything. And I've been at evenings when a magician pulls out what is their set pieces and just it doesn't go over because it works. The jokes, the pace, everything works for people of a similar demographic, but suddenly you're in a different culture, different age, different situation, different location, different everything, lighting and whatever it is. And it's crucial. Every time I get to an evening, I'll assess everything and look at what I have and try to pull out what will connect best and then think about how I'm going to put this across. Is it going to be more upbeat and more quick paced or more calm and more focused and perhaps more mystical, So yeah, adaptability is everything. And I think it's a school of hard knocks. You got to get it wrong a few times. And culturally, I remember an evening years ago when it was an Arabic client, and knowing if you ask for somebody's hand, I was doing a coin routine, knowing that you should ask for the right hand and not the left hand, because in certain cultures the left hand is not seen as clean, and things like this are pivotal and can break a whole moment for what might be very important people. Having those cultural sensitivities and adapting your material around that, and not, I don't know, pulling out a condom or whatever bad joke it's going to be is so inappropriate. Yeah, it's very important. Adaptability really is everything.
Is there anywhere in particular or anybody in particular that you work with to make sure that you're your material is appropriate for the different cultures? Or
So I've worked out my core routine that goes over pretty much in most situations, and I'll adapt. I know, if like a comedian, when a comedian opens up and they say, "Oh, good evening, Miami," and they'll make a few opening lines about Miami or whatever's been going on politically lately, or I think that's very important. So particularly if it's a stand-up set, you want to read your audience, you want to speak to somebody, you want to learn some local phrases. If you're in a foreign country with a foreign language, pick up on all those little details and weave them in if you can. And I think weaving those in is very important.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going above and beyond as well. And I think this is what so many people are lacking. And like we were saying before we started, when we was just having chat before the podcast today, really, we was talking about a lot of people have been forced into doing online shows. And that's opened up an opportunity to perform around the world. Obviously, you've been fantastic. And before this, you've been just setting off everywhere around and around and around doing everything, which is fantastic in and of itself. But now everyone's got this new opportunity to perform wherever. Like I was doing shows the other day. I was doing some in LA and then Barcelona the next day, whilst all I've got to do is walk 5 minutes to my living room. Yeah. So when you're doing it online, is there any tips that you could maybe give and share on how this applies to the online world then?
Do you know what? In truth, I've slightly avoided the online stuff. Or rather, I haven't embraced it. I just, I decided quite early on, it's been a huge wave and I think very successful for a great many people. I just figured for the clients that I have, I know that I can't offer a fraction of the connection, the intimacy, the sensation of the whole experience through a webcam. So I've done one or two for very insistent clients, but by and large, I decided I'd ride this out without really doing it. I just so much of my material depends on having people so engaged with it. I didn't quite lean into the Zoom wave, but it's a beautiful thing, and I know people are doing obviously incredibly well internationally and doing great work.
So you mentioned something a few minutes ago, which I've kind of been pondering a little bit there. Is that you suggested the flexibility, the adaptability, that like all three of us are on the same page here. That's the most important thing to do. But in terms of writing sets let's look at close up for just a second. In terms of writing close up sets, do you think we should, or we should just get like a compilation of material that we can dip into, or what's your process?
I've never scripted my close-up, and I take this from Uri Geller. I remember I invited Uri to my school when I was about 15, and he came down and blew everybody's minds. And the beauty to Uri is how much he extemporizes and improvises, and everything is off the cuff, and everything is so raw and authentic and in the moment, and something happens and he takes that and runs with it for 10 minutes. And like a brilliant comedian who has that ability to improvise, it makes it feel so much more authentic. And there's nothing I feel less magical than somebody coming out on stage, or particularly in an intimate close-up environment where it's so much about the back and forth, and just start skimming out lines that are clearly pre-written and not very tailored at all to the moment. I know my start point and my finish point. I know that I'll probably finish with this, and in the middle I'll jazz it a little bit, but I try to put it on the people I'm performing for as much as possible. And very often because the way I work is I'll have a table, people come and they sit down. So my most favorite performance style is to have a large trestle table, beautiful tablecloth, some candles, some flowers, and I'll have 4 seats, usually 4 seats opposite me. And then people come and sit down, you'll have 4 people sat, and then around 10 or 15 people standing behind them. So you have this beautiful little mini theater. And in that, people sit down and I say, what have you seen? What have you not seen? Have you seen much magic before? What do you really enjoy? And every single time it's completely different. So under the table, I'll have 15 or 20 routines ready to go. And they'll say, I just caught the end of the melon or the whatever it was, the elephant. And I'll say, okay, great, let's, or they'll say, I love mind reading. I once saw a fantastic mind reader. And I'll say, okay, perfect, bring out a book test and go that way. So not only the what you're saying, but I think what you're doing should be tailored and almost a response to what they're looking for, not just ABC every single time. So again, that seated style is a really good litmus test, because what it will invariably happen is the 10 people standing behind will watch a set. Then as the 4 people stand up and leave, 4 of those 10 will sit down. Some people leave, some people come, but you're never having a fresh group every single time. So it forces you to be very present and to say, what did you see? What have you not seen? Have you seen this? Did we try this? What do you enjoy? And in that sense, I'll do maybe 2 or 3 routines for each set, but each one is completely specific to that group. And even the cards, I'll bring out the cards, not know where I'm going to go, and really run with it. Just jazz it up,
I'm looking at Aidan right now, and he's got a big old grin on his face, because he has been saying for years what he does in close up is exactly the same. He's got an idea when he goes in of, okay, this is how I'll approach them. And then he changes everything and alters it for them, for the audience, for their wants and needs and what he feels right in that moment.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think, you could draw a parallel to almost anything. You draw a parallel to comedy or, flirting and seduction and car salesman. You just can't go out there with set lines, because you're going to have a housewife walk in looking for a car one day. You're going to have a 17-year-old millionaire the next day, and then an old man and his wife 2 days later. And the thought that you could ever go in there with exactly the same approach to try to sell them a car is mad. So I think magic is just the same. If you truly want to establish that connection above all else, then it has to be tailored to them and take into account the energy of the moment, the energy of the evening. Is there upbeat background music? Is it quite slow and mellow? Are you in a slightly quieter part of the party? Is the crowd very rowdy and boisterous? You have to look at all these things and then try to match that. That there should never really be one gear for everybody.
So it's just amazing, because this is all resonating exactly with my thought process.
I hope so.
But this, again, we keep coming back to it in this idea of being truly present in this moment, to be able to adapt and be there for your audience. If somebody had never done this before and has no idea what that even means, are there specific things that you do other than just being aware of everything?
I think there's a real confidence in this. And look, this took me a long time to get comfortable with. I'm sure when I started, at school, I would be a little bit more blueprinted in terms of what was happening. But the truth is, it's a comfort with other people, much like a conversation. Some people are paralyzed when they meet strangers and stick to small talk and awkward platitudes and whatever it's going to be. Some people can go off-piste and off-beat and be all kinds of crazy, and they're very comfortable in that. And I think the answer is just to do it. There is one thing which I would say to close-up workers: working from a table and not mix and mingling, not going around on your feet, is poles apart. They are so different psychologically. And I've been doing this now since I was about 18, 19. And it is so rare today. I don't even know the last time I was booked to go somewhere and was walking around. The parallel I draw is between going to a bar and there being someone walking around, let's say a shot girl or a shot boy walking around with shots, a strap of tequila shots and a bottle versus the man at the bar or the woman at the bar with a beautiful big wooden bar. This is their space. They've got all the bottles behind them. It's a far more impressive visual. To me, that's the difference between mingling around, interrupting people mid-conversation, being in their space, invading their space, which is always psychologically difficult. I still, if I was forced to do it now, I would still find it very uncomfortable. People are having, business talks. People are catching up. They haven't seen each other for 7 years. They're flirting. They're all kinds of things. To walk in there with a deck of cards and interrupt all of that and say, "Do you want to see magic?" is is forever, to me, one of the most awkward things in the world. Whereas when you have a table and you arrive at the party an hour or 2 hours early, you set up the table somewhere very central, somewhere very striking. You have some beautiful, I have a framed picture so people know that I'm a magician. I'm not there, reading tarot, whatever it is. I make sure it's somewhere very central, beautiful tablecloth, nice smart chairs. The psychology of that means people are then coming to you. They sit down and suddenly they'll, the first few couples, the groups, they'll come up, they say, oh, can we sit down? And suddenly they're asking you, and you say, of course, please sit down. Can we get you a drink? Are you comfortable? How was your evening? How do you know the hostess? What's this? What's this? And suddenly they're in your space and you thank them for that and you reward them for that. And the difference psychologically in terms of comfort between that and sort of piercing into a group of men or women or whatever it is and trying to establish yourself within the first 30 seconds. Sorry, 2 seconds. It's room service. The difference between those two things, I cannot overemphasize how much more powerful it is to be sat at a table. It's so much more impressive. You can have, like I say, 15 people standing around. You're not just doing, 4 men and women in the corner of the room. You are, as I say, the man behind the bar. You are one of the main events. If the party allows it and there's budget, you speak to the organizer, you go to the venue a few weeks before, you say, can I have flowers here? Can we rope off this little area? Can we make this visual as striking as possible? So people walk into the party, they see you over there surrounded by people having a good time, and they go, okay, magician. He's clearly a magician doing really well. And, in terms of psychology, it's a different world. In terms of the magic possible, it's a different world. The lapping opportunities, you can have all of your props under the table. You're not bulging with props in every pocket and your suit is looking terrible with 15 decks of cards. You have everything under the table. I finish every evening of my sort of set piece to finish is very often the melon, the Max Malini under the hat. And it's just the best thing in the world. And surrounded by 20, 25 people, and the host and the hostess are sitting up front. It's the best thing in the world. And it allows for so much more magic, so many more techniques, so many more props. It's so much more striking. And as I say, psychologically, they're in your space. And in that situation, it's just naturally more comfortable. You can be more, I can find myself be far more relaxed. And if you told me to go downstairs now to the hotel lobby and walk up to a group of people and force myself on them and start doing magic, I would, I'm sure, revert back to my 17-year-old gangly, awkward self, So I would say if people listening have never tried that, the way to do it is to speak to a client. You say, look, if it's a drinks reception or after dinner or whatever it is, look, I'd love to try this. I do this quite often. You set up the table. You promise them, if nobody comes and visits me, I'll walk around the room. This is how I used to start. I say, I promise you, if nobody's here after 10 minutes, I'll walk around the room and do it. But I promise you, this is so much better. You set up the table, you set up the flowers, you set up the candles, whatever it is. People come to you, obviously, within 10 minutes. And once you're rolling, it's non-stop. I did 8 hours once. I was at an Oxford University summer ball, and I did this for 8 hours. I had bottles of water on this side. I had Mars bars under the table on this side, and I literally did not stop for 8 hours. And if you can then get photos taken, you have a photographer standing to your left, so or right, but slightly behind you, so they get a profile of you and the wall of faces. And if you say to the photographer, just wait until something amazing happens, and then just machine gun the button, you'll get some unbelievable photos of 25 faces with their mouths wide open. And then every single gig you do after that, you send that to the client or the event organizer and you say, this is how I work. And I promise you, you are so much more valuable than, like I say, the shot glass equivalent, which is going around doing little tricks out of your pocket. It's a whole different world. So I'd really urge people to try that.
I love that shot glass analogy. And I also think it goes down to that thing of like, when you're there and you've created that special space, people are coming up to you, they're investing their time there. They're now interested in you before you've actually even said anything. So already it's just so much easier. And I've seen a few people do this, and I know magicians know about this style of stuff with sitting down at a table at an event, but still no one does it. Still people revert back to just walk around close up. And you've literally outlined why it can be so much better and so much more beneficial, and especially for you and all the positives you've said about this. Do you think there's a reason why people always revert back to what they know in the same mode of just walking around? And
I guess it's what people are used to, and again, it's what a lot of us grow up watching, walk around magicians and whatever. But there's just no question. There is no question. You are a far more valuable asset. You're a far more striking visual in the middle of the party. If it's a drinks reception, I will set up as you walk into the room. I'll make sure I'm one of the first things you see, and I'll say, can we have soft ambient lighting? You don't want harsh shadows. You don't want heavy shadows on the table. Soft lighting. As I say, I'll rope off, get a red rope around the side of the table so no one creeps around behind me. I'll have beautiful flowers, maybe floor standing flowers either side of the table. Whatever it's going to be, it looks so beautiful and magical. And if there's space for a backdrop, it can be a red velvet backdrop, whatever it's going to be. It's just, you're so much more of an asset to that evening than, like I say, running around with your pockets bulging. And I don't know why more people don't do this. It's obviously not for every evening. Some events, they just say, look, we need you to go around at dinner, which, to me, interrupting people literally mid-mouthful and trying to crane over their shoulders when everybody's squeezed together and you have to clear space on the table and you're dropping, it's just, to me, it's so clumsy. And I feel it does you a disservice by being the little insert between courses, when actually you go, look, I'm going to do an hour at the drinks reception. As soon as people break for dancing or as soon as dinner's finished, I'll go happily do another hour or two after dinner. And it's an attraction. You'll literally be, if you do it right, you'll be the focus of the party. People will come over to you. They'll drag their husbands and wives over. They'll say, oh, my wife saw this. I'm so glad you're still here. And please, could you do this? And it is just, I cannot put across to people how much more exciting, more powerful, more impactful, more visual this style is. So if anybody wants to reach out, I can send pictures. I can tell you more about it. But effectively, you ask the client or the event organizer for a 6-foot trestle table, 5 chairs, very as smart as possible, and a heavy, thick tablecloth, black or white normally, and that's it. Like I say, a few silver framed photographs, nice, powerful profile, magical pictures, 8-10 inches tall either side of the table. I have a brass nameplate, like a Toblerone brass nameplate that I used to have at the front of the table, which has an inbuilt reveal. So there's a brass nameplate on one side and then a brass nameplate on another side. Nigel Mead gave me this years ago. We were doing a job in Azerbaijan, and I had this brass nameplate, and he said, you know what, you should do this. And it's a beautiful trick. So it's a 3-sided Toblerone wooden block with a brass nameplate on one side, and it would say, I still have it somewhere, Drummond Money-Coutts, Close Quarter Magician, and Card Shark. And I show that to everybody, and I set it aside. I shuffle the cards. I have somebody choose a card, and as I move the wooden block out of the way to ribbon spread the cards and show them all different, I just rotate it. I turn it so the existing brass face is now on the table, touching the table, and the other brass face is now facing outwards. So in this sort of sweeping gesture, I rotate the wooden block. I show the cards as all different. I say, what was your card? And they say the 8 of hearts. And I say, if you look very, very carefully at the engraving, and they look across and it says Drummond Money-Coutts, and the second line says something like the chosen card is the 8 of hearts or whatever it is. And it's just a beautiful little establisher. But, a few little things on the table make it look a little bit more interesting. You're not just sat there at a blank tablecloth. It can be a nameplate. It can be photos in really, striking silver frames, flowers, candles, whatever it's going to be. But just there's an ambience to it. You're not just sat there with a deck of cards at a white tablecloth. There's if you can, a backdrop, some lighting, anything that just makes it look and feel a little bit more enticing, So as I say, if anybody wants to reach out, by all means, send me a message on whatever, and I can send you some pictures. I would wish for more magicians to do this, because it's just, You go from such a side distraction at a party to literally the main event, and everybody talks about you forever. And it's just, yeah, as I say, the impact is just, they can't be compared at all.
I'll admit I've tried this approach once.
How did it go?
I did it. It was a game changer. It was, and I'm not saying that because we're sat here having this conversation. It was so different. So, for context, rather than being in a specific area where everybody could see, there was another little bar in this. It was a wedding venue, and there was like another little secret bar up at the top. So that in and of itself was interesting. But I had a little corner up there, and I went down to the main bar to go and get a glass of water. Brought some people up with me, and because then the secret bar was suddenly popular news. But not just a secret bar, it was the magician's secret bar, and suddenly there was people. It was amazing.
Oh, that's it. It's a whole thing, and you want to be a little bit careful. I've definitely done evenings in the past where you can be too secluded. So again, as best you can, try to be visible. But as I say, if you can only to anyone listening, if you can do one of these gigs, obviously if the evening allows for it, if you can do one of these and get a handful of good photos, you then put that into a PDF, you put that into your, whatever you send a new client, you go, look, this is what I do, this is how I work. And I've never had anybody query me and say, no, I prefer you actually to do this. And more than that, the people that see you at an event, at an evening, do this, then book you because they've never seen anything like this. So once if you can only do it once, if you can only convince that first client to allow you to set up the table, you assure them if nothing, if it doesn't happen, if they push back, you say, look, if it doesn't happen, I can go around, but I promise you this is so much better. You get those photos and then you're away. And as I say, I haven't done walk around for years, and I don't know, 10, 12 years. And this whole format is just, it's an animal, it's a monster.
It goes down to that point that rather than just being there to go and do some magic and do some magic tricks at a party or an event, you're there, it's a moment, and you're building up the stories. And I'm obsessed with trying to find the best way to, and I got fed up with audiences that have seen me like either a couple of weeks or a year before. They recognize me and say, oh, I remember when you did X, Y, and the stories that they were telling me, I loved that they remembered, but I didn't love that they remembered the bits that they had remembered. I wanted the stories that they had to be slightly different and remember the event and their feelings of the event, not just the cool card trick that I ended up doing.
No, that'll happen. I mean, for me, the melon, people see me 10 years later and they go, oh, the melon, can you do the melon? Can you do this? And it's just what it is. People remember what they remember, but to be remembered is a great joy. So, whatever that is, whatever that memory is.
I think as well, what you've been saying all throughout this about how you approach entertainment at events and how you make this special kind of scene and a real environment and feel for people, it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, surely, like with you going around and doing all of these events in different cultures for various different people, surely this style was much more suited to them, because it's harder to go up to various different people who might be goodness knows from wherever, and you're like, okay, but instead they're coming to you and now they're in your zone rather than you in them in their zone.
Totally. No, it's just when you allow your brain to start thinking about the lapping possibilities, you take the cards out of the box, you lap the box and give it to someone and have it vanish, and within 4.5 seconds you've already done something completely mind-blowing. Productions under the table, the props that you use, you could be doing God knows what with enormous props. It's I feel like I've sold it, but it's the possibilities to performing like this and the impact it has on the evening, as opposed to just tiptoeing around nervously or gregariously, interrupting people mid-conversation, mid-dinner, mid-whatever. It's just, it's a whole different thing.
To play devil's advocate, I mean, I'm on the same page here in that I think this is genuinely the new way. I don't think I'm going to, because I didn't resonate. I'm one of the people that we're talking about here that doesn't like the interrupting people. But I'm really curious, has there ever been a time where this approach hasn't either, I don't want to say hasn't worked, because that's not what I mean, but has there ever been a time where this kind of approach has brought a problem or an unexpected incident?
Yeah, so there's certainly a few. I think early days I learned to be very visible. I definitely early on would probably do an evening and perhaps didn't insist enough that I'd be somewhere very central. So you're in a quiet corner and you're just not very busy. So you'd end up going around the evening. Or, I've done some evenings where maybe it's so thick with people, you don't have that movement within the room. So the people within earshot know about you. But if there isn't constant traffic and footfall and people moving around the evening, then that can be a challenge. So the few situations, but almost always. And again, the more it's unbelievable how much you do 3 or 4 groups, you've then broken the back of it, and people will literally go across the party, grab their best friend, say, "You've got to come and see this. You've got to come and see this." They'll grab their wife, they'll grab whatever, and they'll bring them back. And then literally they're coming to you. And as I say, psychologically, it's wonderful. You don't have that awkwardness or whatever. So I don't think there's been a situation where I've thought, I wish I was walking around or whatever. It's very hard to find reasons not to do this. It's so outweighed by the positives.
Hi guys, it's Ashley here. I just want to quickly interrupt this podcast just to say one little thing. If you do enjoy the podcast that we are currently putting out at The Successful Mentalist, do us a favour and make sure to subscribe. It will honestly help us out. It will mean the world. It will help with our stats and rankings, which mean that we're then shown to more magicians and mentalists around the world. And we want to try and help as many people as possible with these podcasts. So honestly, if you could subscribe, it would mean the absolute world to us. Anyway, back to the podcast.
I love this. I love it because this is fitting literally my thing. But and again, I'm asking questions purely for my own point here, because this is definitely something that I'd love to go and do more. But when I'm performing, I've got quite a bubbly energy. I've described myself previously as a Tasmanian devil in a 3-piece.
Right.
But when boiling that down from a stage situation, I mean, on stage that's a different situation. That fits wonderfully. But in close up, it's kind of been tough, and I think that's why I've not gelled with it. But then if I was to take this leap and put it all the way to just I'm now sat in one place for an evening, I don't think I'm going to get the same sort of energy levels that I usually would. I mean, it's going to be a different style of performance in theory.
No, so this is very important. I think this is very important. I think characters, slightly louder characters, slightly more shaped characters works very well on stage, right? You want to be something a little bit unusual, a little bit offbeat, whatever that might be. In close-up magic, intimate close-up, interactive magic, I think it does a disservice to be strange and kooky and offbeat. You just need to connect with people. And if you're too weird and zany, people can't really get a handle on you. And really in close-up magic, they should be maybe speaking just as much as you. This isn't people static watching you and listening to you. You're asking them questions. You're involving them in the magic. You're bringing them into your world. You're involving them as much as you can. And I think in that, to have what feels like, or what can feel like quite a hokey character, which can work brilliantly on stage, I don't feel works as well. The very greatest thing you can be for close-up magic, at a table, is, for me, personable, authentic, genuine, charming. Can I help you? Can we get you a drink? Would you like anything? Have you all those things, which if you're flying above them with all kinds of strange weirdness and overly bubbly energy, I think it's hard to connect. Sometimes you'll get a group who are just full steam mad and bananas, and they're on a mission, and they're all 3 drinks in and they're having a great time, and you can raise yourself to that level of energy. But a lot of the time you'll have a husband and wife, or you'll have the host and the hostess, or you'll have a mixed group, maybe with somewhat slightly older somebody, whatever it might be, and it's about connecting with them. Again, just like salespeople talk about mirroring the energy of the person that you're trying to establish that rapport with, and going in with one gear that can work on stage. But I with the degree to which close-up magic is so much more interactive and hinges on the give and take of the conversation and what's going back and forth between you and your audience, I just think actually you want to be the truest, most charming, most engaging form of you, and nothing too structured, too managed, too tight. It's just be loose, be engaging, be welcoming, be friendly, be mindful of everything. And I think that, in my experience, has led to the greatest success in the close-up situation.
Well, it goes back to something which I'm so glad you brought it up, and I was going to mention the Johari window and actually mirroring what the audience is kind of putting out there, and so you're kind of at those same energy levels going throughout. But you mentioned something about sharing humanity, sharing yourself within the performance, and so often than not, magicians kind of hide behind the tricks, either because they think that the tricks are important, they forget about themselves, that they're actually there to see you and your amazing stories and hear about you and all of that. Do you have any advice for maybe those people who are thinking, okay, this is brilliant, Drummond, what you shared is absolutely mind-shattering gold, and now they're thinking, okay, I want to be a bit more human, I want to share myself instead of just hiding behind the tricks? And how would they go about doing that, do you think?
So
to really break it down?
There's a few things. It's a very good question. So for example, when I left university, I went full tilt professional and was as busy as I could be and did every party that came in. And I think my first Christmas, I did 23 dates in December before Christmas Day. And it was just back to back to back. And I know that by the, whatever it was, 20th, 21st of December, I literally had exhaustion medicine and flu medicine under the table, and I was on complete autopilot, and the magic that I was doing was on complete autopilot because I was just routinely going through the routines that I had done literally every single day for the last 3 weeks. What I then did, which I tried to do back then when I was far more frequently performing, as many times as I could, I very consciously would always take myself to India in January, and I would always go back and I'd put the magic down and I'd go traveling, and I felt like in those London Christmas parties and going from crazy party to crazy party, I'd lose a sense of reality, and you just become this autopilot magic monkey, and actually to go to India and completely reset, and that internal barometer of life and everything, and to rest and to recoup and to come back with a fresh energy. For me, that was India. I think for many people, this can just be time out and actually stepping away from the magic. I think clinging to 6 to 10 routines that you do word for word every single time is no more useful than it is to go to a gym and do exactly the same thing for years and years on end. You have to keep it fresh. You have to adapt and develop according to your situation. For me, I step away from magic very often. I'm not performing every single week. I will happily go to India or go wherever it's going to be and not think about magic. And there is almost never a moment when I do come back to magic, I'm not the better for it in some way. And the flip side, if I find myself doing far too much magic back to back to back, it's very hard not to click into this sort of autopilot. And you see it. I've seen magicians, Vegas or whatever it's going to be, you go and they are just going through the motions. And I was told by someone, there's a prominent magician in Las Vegas who literally will present a trick, turn around, flick his mic off, order dinner, flick around and start the next trick. And it's complete autopilot. And you can see how that's difficult in terms of then trying to establish a genuine, sincere, authentic, present connection. So, to people who perhaps find themselves stuck in that, the ruts of the same tricks, the same lines, the best thing you can do is probably throw it all out of the window and try to find a few new pieces, a completely different approach. Try something completely different. Just as I say in personal fitness, go cycling, go swimming, go running, go weightlifting, go skipping, go whatever it's going to be. Doing the same 10-mile cycle every single day, you're going to plateau very quickly, and it's important to keep all of these things as fresh as possible.
So what we're running with here is kind of preventing. It's almost like burnout prevention from being a magic addict, if you like.
Yeah.
In a way that's going to allow us to foster better presence when we're performing, and creativity. Do you think creativity will come into it as well in terms of stepping away?
Yeah, I think it's just a fresh approach, a more human approach. This is, to me, India just fills my soul in so many ways. And wherever I go after India, I find myself so much more enriched and present. And as I say, if I'm running around doing gig after gig, back in the day, I would feel the opposite of that. And like I say, this sort of 23-day burnout, it absolutely would be a creative, spiritual, personal burnout. So, stepping back, I think, is important. I think I've never been too closely wedded to the magic community and studying what everybody else is doing. I think that's very important. If you're too close to something, you can't help but have it rub off on you, and you will be a slightly homogenous version of your 10 favorite magicians that you watch all the time. And if you look at the strangest, most unique performers, many of them, to some degree, keep a distance. You want to look at your Leonard Greens, your René Lavande, your whoever it's going to be. They come from one of my favorite magicians in the world was Del Rey, who famously never hung out with magicians, would very rarely go to conventions. He just did his thing. And there are some videos online people can look up if they don't know about him. Del Rey, Delray. And he was so phenomenal and American, very engaging, very funny, very present. And I'm sure that was a part of it. He wasn't too rounded by obsessing and keeping track of everything in the magic world and this person, this latest thing, and being, rounded by obsessing over the magic world. I think a certain distance and finding you and allowing you to bubble up is crucial. So, when I was a teenager at school, I was on all the forums and I was deeply plugged into the magic world, but I am far less now. I have a great many friends in the world, but I definitely don't. I go to not very many conventions. I don't obsess or orbit my mind around the latest goings on or the dramas or the whatever it is. I try to keep a distance, and then I find my magic is just more me, more fresh, more authentic,
Well, I hear about you being present and focusing so much. Like what we've spoken about today is with all of the things you're going around doing, with the way you adjust your shows, you do everything for the audience, and you do it so you can be present in the moment. That's a lot of what I feel from what you've said today. But also you say the importance of kind of taking a step back, taking that time for yourself as well. And that leads me to a question. Obviously, you've said about taking breaks, taking time off. So, as Aidan said, you don't kind of hit that burnout. But do you have any kind of like meditation or mindfulness practices that you use and to actually help with obviously your performances or help with stopping hitting that burnout?
Yeah, so I don't meditate as such. I read a lot around this. I listen to a lot around this. I speak and I'm close to a lot of people around all of this. I don't sit for a given period each day or every couple of days. I guess the biggest thing for me is I don't fill my head with social media. For me is a one-way street. I heard Joe Rogan talk about posting and ghosting. So he literally uploads and he goes, and he doesn't sit and scan and pour through everything. And Facebook and all of these things, this deluge of constant traffic and brain noise that each of us can fill our heads with BBC News, the Daily Mail, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you've woken up for 10 minutes and you filled your head with 73 different stories. And I sort of take the opposite approach. I try to keep my head as many ways as empty as possible. You know, I will absolutely focus on things that are relevant and pertinent and important, and keep abreast of what matters. But I just try to keep myself on a mental diet of what is important, and not this, you know, just, I think back to university and the things that we filled our heads with, that just, you see it now, it reflected in statistics and all kinds of awful stories. Keeping a distance and keeping space for yourself and people around you and your work, and not just cramming your head with this fast food of everything, I think is very, very important. And if you can allow yourself the space to do that, I think meditation becomes less necessary. You know, if you live a very manic life, perhaps with children, or a very manic job, or whatever it is, then yes, I think meditation perhaps would become more important to really carve out time to allow that to fall through you. But in my life, as I try as best I can just to not allow all that superfluous noise to get in there in the first place, you know, and then in that you find a presence, and your brain isn't flicking back to something from yesterday, or throwing forwards to something you're fretting about next week or next month or whatever. You know, you can be far more rooted in the now.
It's just, this, because this is on a sort of personal level. This is where I'm at now. I'm at the point that my head is full. Right. Probably even overflowing with things, right? And I know I can see this empty head, for lack of a better description, but I can see that, and that's what I'm trying to move towards. And obviously, then we've got the necessary or the unnecessary evils, like the social media that we've just spoken about. But
right.
How would one, say, in this messy mind approach, carve out what really matters and find that path?
It's a really good question. There's a few things. I remember reading this years ago. It's in one of the Sherlock Holmes books. There's a moment when Dr. Watson suddenly realizes, I think this is right, this was many years ago. There's a moment when Dr. Watson realizes that Sherlock Holmes doesn't know if the moon goes around the earth. It's something like this. It's a very fundamental scientific understanding that Watson can't believe Sherlock Holmes, this great man of intelligence, doesn't know. And Sherlock Holmes's answer is something along the lines of, I fill my head with nothing but that which serves my immediate purpose, right? So whether the moon goes around the earth is not important to him on a daily basis. It's not going to change his life. It's not going to help him solve this next great riddle or crime or whatever it is. There are limits to this. Now, it's important to fill our heads with certain important facts and figures and current affairs to a degree. But it would be, I think, the equivalent of a bad physical diet, right? Most of us are living very poor mental and emotional diets as a complete result of filling our heads with just the most emotive, damaging, dangerous headlines, and just all kinds of photos and friends and people that we're not perhaps very close to at all, perhaps don't even like, we're still following, looking at all their holiday pictures, and you know, all these things that it's like 10 Big Macs to the brain every single day. And it's not easy to come out of that, right? You can't go from 10 Big Macs a day to a quinoa salad. You need to grade down the ladder. You need to, you know, perhaps initially just, I don't follow people on Instagram. I every now and then I'll look up some friends or somebody I'm into, and I'll look through their posts. Facebook, I'm never on Facebook. I'm on YouTube a little bit, but I just weeded out all of these noises, these loud noises that just didn't, as it comes back to Sherlock Holmes, didn't serve my immediate purpose. And I think all of us can look at ourselves. There will be shades of grey for everybody, but all of us can look at, do I really need to scan Twitter and see people screaming at each other about the most trivial, whatever it's going to be? Do I need to look at news websites and have my head filled with people screaming at each other and knowing that I can do nothing about it? Do I need to follow people on social media that I haven't seen for 7 years, never really were particularly close to or even liked in the first place? Do I need to orbit around every latest magical happening in the world? Is that actually going to affect the magic that I do, my business, my routines? It's just slowly, much like coming off drugs or, as I say, a bad diet Coke or whatever it's going to be, coming down slowly and just closing these doors to all of this noise and this, these antagonizing thoughts that just so quickly turn our brains into these sort of thorn bushes of thoughts. If you can just push all that away, be following the people that you adore, who inspire you, who motivate you to, socially, I used to be so much busier. Now I have my, whatever it's going to be, dozen or so, few dozen people, Mumbai, probably a dozen people here that I adore. But I don't fill my diary with coffee dates and lunches and just sort of manically doing as much as possible. I think in all of these spaces, there's a lot to be said for less is more, and maybe even professionally, doing fewer gigs, but doing them to a level that you're your very best self. You're not just taking every gig that comes in, because there's something to be said for going to a gig and not being right, and that not helping you at all. It can dent your confidence. It can close doors in the future. That event organizer says, oh, actually, yeah, that didn't go over very well. He wasn't very good at that. And suddenly you'll never be called up again. So, I think just filtering out a lot of things for so much of life is pivotal. And I think it was, I mean, who said this? I think it was a Buddhist somewhere who said, it's not about getting more, it's about wanting less, being happy with less. And I think if we can all do that, it just leaves that space to be calm and at peace, and not always looking left and right and what are they doing? How much is he making? And all this sort of stuff. You just focus on you, study, and fill your head with the things that serve your immediate purpose, your health, your family, your friends, your immediate future. But go easy on the noise, the fast food, the social media candy, Sorry, there's a lot there. That was a rant. Half rant.
Perfect. That's literally what I needed to hear based on that. Yeah, that's going to take some processing power. That's
right. Yeah, it's probably a rewind on that. Somewhere.
Good.
This is what I do. This is what I do magically. If you give me a little rope, we'll run. So by all means, rein me in.
This is absolutely beautiful, and I think this is what our audience needs to hear more now than ever. And there's been something myself and Aidan, I've been slowing my words all podcast. Myself and Aidan have been saying all the time when we set up TSM, when we have our students, and it goes back to that thing of time is our most valuable asset. We've always got that in the back of our mind, and we'd rather focus it on the things we love and the things we enjoy. And you've taken that, but you've evolved on it so much more and taken it in brand new directions, which is just fantastic. So I just want to honestly say thank you so much for being so open, so honest, and sharing so much valuable gold on this podcast. Very, very quickly, where can people find you? Where can they find all of your amazing stuff?
Well, as part of what I've just said, I'm certainly not the most active on, so I should be much better, but Instagram now and then, everything is DMC Magic. So YouTube, in fact, YouTube, I started putting up a few videos which were great fun over the summer when we were allowed to socialize with people. So in fact, talking about all of this, that you'll see that if you go to my YouTube, it's just it's youtube.com/DMC Magic. You'll see what I'm talking about, and so many moments, little organic moments that happen in these takes. I just run with them and turn them into little bits, and somebody offers a slight tangent and I'll go down that path, and I'm sat at the table. Each group was only 2 or 3 people, but you'll see what I mean, that I'm not ripping through a script. I'm not, it's very unstructured. Again, going back to Uri Geller, I know I'm going to start here and finish here, but in the middle, I'm going wherever they want to go. So that could be of interest to some people. But yeah, mostly, if people want to reach out, DMC Magic on Instagram, happy to help out. And yeah, YouTube, a few things now and then. But I'm yeah, from what I just said, I'm certainly not super plugged in to all of this.
That is absolutely brilliant. And no, I just want to say massive thank you for taking the time to come here today. And like I said, just be so open and honest.
Thank you, chaps. Thank you. It was great to see you.
I mean, as I said in the episode, in and of itself, I got so much from this. The conversation took very different turns in terms of actually being better at magic just by being present in the moment and being able to look at life overall and the less is more approach and Drummond's philosophy. Like, for me, there was an awful lot in this. I really valued this episode on that personal level. So again, I'm going to throw a huge thanks out to everybody that's supporting the podcast and for Drummond, more importantly, for coming on and having this conversation with us.
Yeah, no, it really was fantastic. And I just want to say that is still not it. There's a little bit more to come, a little bonus clip of what Drummond actually shared. So we're going to play that in just a second for you guys. And I just want to say, if this is the first time of you listening to the Successful Mentalist podcast, then do consider hitting the subscribe button so you'll hear about all of the other wonderful podcasts that we're putting out there. And if you have been listening to all of the previous episodes, share your feedback in the reviews below. It'll be so lovely to see those just down below this podcast. But without further ado, let's jump into the little bonus clip right now that Drummond shared right at the very end.
It's just something that I made with Phil, and this is something we've been very conscious of in keeping with everything I've talked about, which is the alphas, the DMC alphas, which is this letter deck, which just, in terms of connecting with people, allows you to, be it pre-show or just the name of somebody present. 52 cards, they're all letters. You have somebody shuffle the cards, deal random piles, whatever it's going to be, cam coincidencia or some sort of variation on that. And suddenly they're looking down at the name of their child or the name of their father or their husband or their girlfriend, whatever it is. In line with all of this, finding connection with people, I would love people to try this because, Phil knows, I know, you guys know, you play with this. People are in tears, not infrequently when I do these routines. If I do my pre-show or my research well enough and I find a piece of information that they know, supposedly, that I don't know, the name of their child, the name of whatever it's going to be, and reveal that to them, there you go. It's a whole different beast. And actually on my YouTube, there's a few videos of me. There's a routine called Hands Off, and there's a routine called the Goose Chase. And if people look those up, they'll see what I mean. It just hits people in a far more, it's effectively a 4-ace routine or a poker deal routine, but instead of a royal flush that no one really connects with, it's the name of their child. And that connection, I've been rebooked off this deck alone countless times because it just truly touches people. And if you, like I said, if you can do a little bit of research either at the party or before the party or whatever it is, get the name of somebody important. And at the end of the routine, you say, what is the name of let's say your youngest child? And they say it's Lucy. And then you say, would you turn over those cards one by one? And they turn over Lucy, and it blows people away. So I realize that sounds like a plug, but it's not. It's just that this deck embodies my philosophy of magic in so many ways, and establishing that true connection with people beyond just something being a trick and impossible. It emotionally resonates with them in a completely different way. So if people haven't tried that, by all means, just watch the videos, as I say, on YouTube, Goose Chase and Hands Off. They're just very personal, powerful routines.
Agree. It genuinely, the alphas, as soon as they were first released, it was like, yep, that's going to be a definite investment. They're so good, so useful.
Yeah, it makes it more personal, exactly as you say, because, and especially like you were saying, with different cultures going around, like not every culture knows playing cards, and well, I mean, not every culture knows how to read these alphabet, but if they do, then it just changes that dynamic completely.
Well, I had a put it this way, I had a Middle Eastern client beginning of last year, just before lockdown, and I was in the Middle East, and I started with very basic. I shuffled the cards. They were taking the cards and mixing them, and we ended up with a few piles on the table, and it was the name of the main gentleman's wife, who obviously was sat right next to him. And I cannot tell you the wave of emotion that went through the group was so palpable and so powerful, and they were so touched that it was her name. It was very respectful. It really resonated. As I say, I've had people well up and be in tears a number of times with this deck. I did something for Rolls-Royce about 2 years ago, and there was this older gentleman, and he had a much younger girlfriend who I'm not sure it was a long-term situation. And she was on her phone. She was kind of sat on her phone, whatever. And I was doing something for him. I actually was walking around, interestingly. That was one of the few. I was walking around, I was talking to him, I was doing some things for him, and mid-routine, one of the staff came up and gave him his plasmon for dinner, the little envelope that has their seating arrangement in it, right? It was a little envelope, beautiful writing on the front of the envelope. And it said, I forget what his name was, but the girl's name was Dina, right? Deena. And he took it from the chap, and he put it in his inside jacket pocket. But as he's putting it in there, I just glimpsed, it was like half a second, it said his name, whatever it was, and Dina. And I just figured, obviously, that's her name, right? She hadn't introduced herself. She'd barely looked up. She'd been sat there on her phone the whole way through. He was completely charming. And so I took out the alphas. I stacked up Dina. I did the routine, and I swear to you, this man came up to me 5 times through. He knew she maybe had been, invited that day. There was no way I could have known her name. She never introduced herself, blah, blah, blah. And that little added layer of impossibility just blew his mind. He couldn't believe it. He was in his probably late 60s, and he hounded me like a kid the whole evening. And it was just so demonstrative of how much more that resonates and touches and connects with people than, 4 queens or 4 aces or whatever it is. So just, have a play. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I remember actually going back to Blackpool beginning of last year.
Right.
You was doing the same thing there, and you had crowds of magicians just swamping. Obviously, you had crowds of magicians because you got a blooming Netflix series, much, but still, yeah, crowds of magicians watching like that exact thing. They're captivated by it.
Well, you know what Phil does really. I didn't know if I should be tipping this, but what Phil does, Phil often has
take this out of the recording, Aidan.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's tipping a bit, but you can appreciate this is the genius of Phil. So Phil will often have someone else on his stand, just helping out and whatever. And they have an arrangement whereby if a gentleman or a lady walks up, Phil will start chatting and get their name. And then the guy, whoever's next door to Phil, will just stack up that name, put the cards back in the box and just leave the box next to Phil. Phil chats for a bit and then picks up the deck and we'll go, I'll tell you what, let's try something. And with, one random shuffle, we'll go into goose chase or hands off or whatever. And it just wrecks people. It completely destroys magicians, hard to fool magicians. And it's beautiful to watch.
It's just using the main deception that we all love and obsess over, just using it against them.
Just what?
It's just using it against them, just in a completely obvious way.
Yeah. Oh, it's very powerful. Very powerful.
I love that.
Anyway. Well, it's great to see you, chaps. I'm glad you're well. I'm glad you're healthy. Stay good. Stay sane. And following on from what I was saying, as you said, Ashley, today more than ever, our mental diets, our emotional diets, when we're all living in echo chambers without distraction, is so key. And winding back from all the rubbish that's being spewed out online, and it's just the most important thing. So less, I think, in all of this, a little bit less is definitely more. And I say this
Yeah.
from day 4 of my quarantine. So I have not left this hotel room in 4 days. So I know the value of not
That's so
you
good.
know, going to bananas.
I was trying to find a no, I've got a book on my shelf. Do less, achieve more.
There you go. There you go. No, very true. Very true. It's everywhere. But yeah, no, well, great to see you. We stay connected. And yeah, if anybody wants I don't know, further info, or I can send pictures of the table setup, just let me know and I'll send them over.
100%. Well, thank you.
Great.
Honestly, thank you
No,
for
great to see you,
for
Chaz.
being here. And yeah, I know there's so many people which are gonna resonate with so many different parts of this.
I hope so. I hope so.
So anyway,
right.
you take care.
Well,
You enjoy Mumbai.
Take care, chaps. Thank you.
Yeah,
Much
have a
love.
lovely
Thank you so
day.
much.
Bye bye.